and all that.
All right, we're recording, and here we go. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to a live Transition US webinar with Erik Ohlsen. The title of today's webinar is Scaling Up Regenerative Solutions. My name is Nils Paulson. I serve as Communications Director for Transition US. And I'm just going to really be stepping back and very loosely facilitating this call. And the floor is going to be with our featured speaker, author and permaculturist, Erik Ohlsen. Before we jump in, I just want to give a few words about the platform that we're using and a little bit of sort of housekeeping. So we're in a Zoom video conference. Some folks are joining by telephone, some by video. I have everybody muted except for our speaker, but there presumably will be some time for Q&A at the end of the call. So if you are a video participant, there's you can, on the bottom, you can click participants, and you should see a little window on the right side. You'll be able to raise your hand. There's a button that says raise hand. Then if I'm not seeing you, you can just type something in chat that says, like, raised hand. If you're a telephone participant, you'll be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. All right, so one other thing, I guess I want to just give a quick shout out for a couple of other Transition US calls that are coming up. On Monday, November 19th, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, we'll have an international network call on what's working in transition, which will be a dialogue between Transition US co-director Don Hall and Transition Movement co-founder Rob Hopkins, and also the delivery director of Transition Network, Sarah McAdam. And they'll be talking for 2 hours and also bringing in participants from all around the movement. So it's a much more sort of, whereas today's webinar is more of a sort of frontal presentation from Erik, the call next Monday is going to be very much a dialogue. So I'm inviting folks to check that out. Also, starting in January, we will have a Think Resilience guided course that Transition US is putting on along with Post Carbon Institute. And it's going to go for 7 weeks, starting January 10th. It's going to be every Thursday. There will be a meeting. There's a curriculum that Post Carbon Institute and Transition US have developed around Think Resilience. Folks can find out more about these and other upcoming events at transitionus.org. Also, this webinar, as always, is completely free. We're just providing value to the community by bringing amazing people and great ideas together. Transition US is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we always invite any donations that it might be your bliss to share with us. Transition US is the nonprofit national hub of the global transition towns movement. So we serve and support community organizers and groups around the country that are doing work on the ground to build local resilience. Also, one other quick final celebration. We just had our first ever online summit. It was a day-long Transition Online Summit, which featured some really amazing keynote presentations, including Meg Wheatley, Rob Hopkins, and other panel discussions. And we have the videos of those now available. So if you go to transitiongathering.org, /videos, and I'll paste that link in the chat as well. There's some excellent resources, these recent talks that were offered at our online summit. And we're now planning our second ever Transition National Gathering in Pittsburgh for next summer. So next summer we'll be taking it to Pittsburgh. Very excited about all that. But for now, I'm really excited to step back and offer the floor to Erik. First, I'll just give a quick introduction to a man who probably doesn't need too much of an introduction at all. I think a lot of people are probably tuning in because we follow your work, Erik, and admire you so much. But if you're new to the work of Erik Ohlsen, Erik is Executive Director of the Permaculture Skill Center, which incidentally is also where the Transition US headquarters is based in Sebastopol, California. The Skill Center is a vocational training school that offers advanced training in ecological design, landscaping, farming, and land stewardship. Erik is also the founder and principal at Permaculture Artisans, a fully licensed contracting firm specializing in the design and installation of ecological landscapes and farms throughout California. Erik is an internationally renowned certified permaculture designer and practitioner, and certified permaculture teacher. And he's well known and seasoned as an activist organizer who's been working with permaculture and activist movements since 1998 when I was knee-high. And maybe I was a little taller than knee-high then. In the field of ecological land development and management, Erik has extensive experience with projects that range from small urban lots to 100+ broad acre design and implementation. His many years of experience observing and listening to landscape patterns and managing installation crews and design teams have led to an extensive knowledge of all aspects of ecological land development and planning. He's a specialist in water harvesting system, food forest design, community organizing, facilitation, vocational education, and much more. Erik is known for his ability to inspire masses of people through his teaching style and ability to weave together complex issues into cohesive narratives that can be acted upon. Erik has worked throughout the world and currently resides in Sebastopol, managing his homestead, running his business, and raising his young family. I'll add that Erik is an author of some amazing books, including books for adults and children. My daughter loves his children's books. I'll say also he's a friend and a person I look up to a lot. He's recently joined in some amazing conversations about permaculture and politics. And I'm very honored now to introduce and welcome Erik Ohlsen. So Erik, I'm going to go ahead and pin your video and just let you totally take it away. Thank you so much, brother, for being here with us today. And thanks to everybody joining us.
Well, thank you so much for that, Nils. So happy to be here with you all. I'm curious where everyone's coming in from. If you want to just post in the chat there where you're tuning in from, that'd be awesome. Get an understanding of what kind of biomes, what kind of ecosystems, what kind of places are you all coming from? Because I know that depending on where we are, our approach to our community regeneration, our land regeneration is going to be very different. So cool. We got folks from all over the United States, England, Caroline's tuning in from Permaculture Skill Center in Sebastopol. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. And I feel like, well, I have a lot that I want to share today, and we'll see just how much I get into it. I mean, there's probably enough to cover, 3, 4, 5 hours worth of conversation here about scaling up regenerative solutions. And so we're going to definitely get deep into some systems, solutions, organizing strategies for scaling up the regeneration of our planet. I'm sitting here in Northern California right now. My kids have been home from school all week, last week and this week, due to the crazy fires that are happening just north of us. And this has become the new normal in California. We carry around these masks now. I feel like I should just do this whole presentation with my mask on so that we understand the reality that we're all living in right now in this part of the world. And so these are like in our pockets everywhere we go. This is the new climate reality, and it can be really intense, can feel apocalyptic. It can feel like, well, what can we do? A 200 square mile fire that moves at 80 acres per minute. How do we intervene in that? What solutions do we have to navigate this kind of scenario? And I think that it's easy when we look at a lot of the global crises to feel really overwhelmed and to feel really like a sense of like, well, we can't catch up to this problem. We can't catch up to this situation. And so I really want to push back on that narrative a little bit today, because I think that there's actually a lot to hope for. And I think that every day when I go out in nature and every day when I go out in my community, I see the blossoming of this regenerative culture taking root. I wanted to share something with you because just being out in the natural world is always so inspiring to me, because, natural ecosystems, they run on abundance, right? They run on surplus, on creating more abundance than the system needs. And so one thing I've been really excited about and interested in lately is planting trees by seed. And I'm in Northern California, so the redwood is, a important tree for this area, but also old growth redwoods are the largest carbon sequestering system, terrestrial carbon sequestering system on planet Earth, are old growth redwoods. Now, that's easy to understand if you know that a redwood tree takes the same amount of years to decompose as it did to grow. So imagine that, 1,000-year-old redwood tree is going to take 1,000 years to decompose. Talk about carbon sequestration and carbon holding. And so I've been really inspired to plant redwoods. Now, of course, this is seventh generation investment. So it's not going to curb our situation in the near term, but check this out. All right. 'Cause I have to share this with you. So if y'all can see this, this is a redwood cone. See if my camera will focus on that. Boom, there's a redwood cone. All right, one redwood cone. Now, I don't know if you all can see this. These are seeds from a redwood tree of one cone, all right? I mean, there's hundreds of seeds in one cone. And these things are tiny. These are like, I don't even know if I can show you, it's so small. Like, that's how small it is. So because we are in dire need of designing human civilization and designing human systems off of natural patterns, off of the way that nature functions, the way nature designs, I actually have a lot of hope because there's hundreds of seeds in one little redwood cone. Well, how many seeds are in your heart? You know, how many seeds are in your mind? There's thousands of seeds as powerful as this one redwood inside every single person. And that's why it gives me a lot of hope. And Brad's asking, do they need fire to germinate? Actually, redwood seeds don't require fire to germinate, but they do require stratification. So I'm going to put these in mulch and then in the refrigerator for a couple months. Because they need to be in cool temperature. And then plant them in ash-filled soil, actually. That's what we've been told by some of the folks around here for germinating redwoods has been successful. A couple quick little housekeeping things. I have a nervous system disorder, and I have to use the bathroom sometimes. So if I step away for a minute or two, I'll be right back. Nils will fill in there, and I'll have some visuals up. So just thanks for the patience there. Just being able to let you know that lets me relax a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and get into a little bit of a presentation here. So let's hope this works. All right. So move that. I'll make sure, oops, make sure I can see the chat. Great. Wow. People are coming in from all over the place. It's so awesome to be here with you all. So I want to just kind of intro a little bit about why there's even a sense to hope. And one of the things that has been really clear to me, because I've been doing this now 20 years, and you know, it's really funny. 10 years ago, my friends, my colleagues and I, we you know, I've been doing permaculture design since 1998, my whole adult life. I'm 39 now. So my whole half my life, I've been doing permaculture and working as an activist and doing regenerative design. And one of the things that is really strikes me about this time right now that we're in is like literally 10 years ago, my friends and colleagues and I were talking about how permaculture design and the approach to design, you know, needs to become a household name. And even here in Northern California, you know, I would walk in town, I'd go down to the city, and people wouldn't even know what permaculture was. It's like, what's that? I don't know what that is. And so 10 years ago, we were saying, okay, we've got to we need an eco-literacy movement to educate the entire populace about how to design human civilization in a way that regenerates nature and that cares for our needs. And now, 10 years later from having that conversation, now permaculture has become like this mainstream movement. And now we're in this really nuanced place where people are like arguing about what's permaculture and what's not permaculture and what's the best way to apply permaculture and what's not the best way to apply permaculture. And if you start a business in permaculture, is it permaculture? And if you, if you do this kind of permaculture, is that okay? And it's like people are arguing. And those of you who spend time in the online space, I'm sure you've seen all of the arguments, and it turns into these different camps. And And it's really disheartening, honestly, when I hear and see just like how divisive our community has become when we talk about how to bring solutions. And so this is where I want to start, because first of all, one reason why there's hope is because decentralized movements are really hard to track, okay? And I think that what's happened over the past couple decades is that people have dedicated their life to regenerating the planet. People have dedicated their careers, have designed their lifestyles, but we don't know it. We can't track all of the gains that this movement has made over the past few decades because folks are insulated. They're building their little homestead gardens. They're raising their families. They're not out there saying to the world, hey, look what I'm doing. They're just taking care of their own. And I think it's really, really hard to track. But the more folks that I talk to, the more students I run into, the colleagues that I talk to, it's pretty clear that a consciousness shift is actually occurring at a pretty large scale throughout the entire planet. I mean, in Europe, obviously Europe is kind of ahead in a lot of ways, but we have whole countries banning plastic, banning deforestation, right? I mean, these are major gains that are happening at a political level, at a country level. And yet our narrative is all often runaway climate change, Trump, nationalist movements. This is the narrative we spend a lot of our time feeling grief about, and we should feel grief about it. And it is a crisis, but we can't track all of the positives that are happening because now inside these movements, there's divisions about what's the best way to do it. That didn't exist 10 years ago. That wasn't the case. We were just trying to wake people up. Now people are so awake that we're having conversations about what's the best way to move forward within our solution centered approach. I'm reading some of the comments. Yes, Susan, we are destroying nature, but we're also regenerating. We've been destroying nature. And okay, Susan, I'm getting in here. Most people still don't know what permaculture is. Yeah, that's true. It's true. But I'm talking about where we were at 10 years ago to where we are now, and the transition that's happened in that time. I think we have to, if we're not going to appreciate the successes and gains that we've made, then it's pretty hard to feel any hope at all. And I think that we have to acknowledge that we have made some gains. And obviously there's a ton of work to get there, but let's just appreciate the gains that we've made right now. And I do think that it's hard to track. Also, another reason to hope is that, we have all the knowledge. We have the knowledge, we have the technology. We don't really need to go out and learn more. In fact, a lot of what we need to do is stop our approach of thinking we know everything and just be in a listening state. Because often the best thing we can do is, in terms of managing ecosystems, is actually to try not to disturb them, do less harm. And I could talk more about that later. Another piece is that, Mother Nature heals really quickly. And with just a little bit of our energy, a little bit of our love, a little bit of our encouragement, we can heal seriously devastated ecosystems. We can reforest. I mean, we stuck a willow branch in the ground in February this year, restoring an eroded gully. We put all these willow cuttings in the ground in February, and they're 8 feet tall now. And they're creating a rhizome mat to reduce erosion and filter water. And that's not even in a year period of time. So being that if we can work with the regenerative mechanisms of nature, we actually have the ability to heal systems really fast. And then the other piece that I want to bring in here is that the solutions to solving ecological crises are actually the same solutions to solve social crises. And I think that it's really important. And I think it's one of the challenges we've had in our communication, our narrative and everything, is that how we bring social movements and ecological movements into the fold integrated. And I think the climate change scenario does a good job of doing that. And I think we need more of that. And every one of these things I'm talking here, we could spend hours just talking about that. So pardon me if I do kind of go through some of this a little bit quickly, but if we're not addressing the social crisis during our ecological regenerative approaches, then we're not really going to be successful in healing Mother Earth, because people are part of the problem, people are the solution, and how we live our lives, our daily actions. I'm trying to teach my kids this. Those of you with families, I just want to say, the other day, we were in here, stuck in here on these smoky days, and I put on the story of Stuff for my children, which is just like a 20-minute little partially animated. Most of you have probably seen that before. Put on the story Stuff for my children, and man, that really opened their eyes, and now it really helps me. And when my kids like, I want to buy this thing or I want to get this thing, it's like, remember story of Stuff? Let's track this. And then, so just want to plant that piece in there. Brad's asking, curious about the financial crisis piece as well. We're going to talk about the financial side here in a minute, because it's a really key factor. So I'm going to move on from here. I feel a lot of hope, because the people that I work with, the community I work with, I see what children, the healing that children can bring to the world right now. I feel that it's really vital that we appreciate the gains we've made, that we celebrate success, because then we know what it actually looks like, what it actually feels like to make some gains there. So let me get out of this. But the thing is if we are, let's see, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to economics. So here's the piece. Here's something that one of the big challenges that I think we're facing inside our regenerative movement right now is the divisiveness around the approaches that we take. Are we doing it through nonprofit organizations? Are we doing it through small businesses? Are we, how do we collapse capitalism? Is socialism and social systems a solution? And so there's all this argument about, no, this one's better, or that one's better, or this one's permaculture, or that one is, or this one's with the ethics, or that. And the thing that is challenging for me in these conversations is that I step back and I actually want to use natural systems thinking in our consideration about how to move forward. And as a permaculture designer, there are a few principles that we apply in design that I think are really important to apply in moving forward. One is site-specific design and least change for the greatest effect. And so I think that when part of the challenge in our conversations about what economic or political system is best, we can have those conversations at the broader level, national governments, global economics, and it's pretty easy to see that capitalism is a total failure. It's pretty easy to see, fascist governments are wrong. Those are pretty easy things to see. But when it comes to what you're actually going to do in your community, like where you live in your bioregion, what's appropriate there in the culture that you're in, or whether you're in an urban, rural culture, an urban culture, or an indigenous community. What is the right solutions for that community? I think these are actually the questions we need to be asking, rather than getting into arguments about what the best system is. It's actually more effective and scalable to take that site-specific design that is vital to regenerating our planet, and allow each community to decide what that is for themselves on a local level. So if we throw out the entire economic system, we say, no, socialism is the only way to go and all capitalist society needs to disappear. Well, how many millions of people are currently dependent on a money-based system like today? I'm not saying that a money-based system is the best system, but how many people are dependent on that today? And if we're going to clear cut the economy in order to build a regenerative world, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think it's going to be effective. We have to be more transitional in considering all the different options on the table. And I've had the experience of working in nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizing collectives. I've been a global justice activist. I've gotten arrested 5 times. I've locked down in front of streets, and I've started small businesses, and I've seen the different effects with each one of these. And I just have to say, it can't be one or the other. It has to be all of them. As Susan says, there's multiple solutions, and there are. And so I think that we have to kind of compost this idea that there's only one way of doing things from an economic and political level, and we have to bring it back down into bioregionalism. And so it's kind of funny that we're talking about scaling up regenerative solutions, but then we actually bring it back down to bioregionalism. One of my favorite means of the global justice movement is globalize localization. Globalize localization. That's what this whole talk is really about. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the other scaling that can happen at bigger level, but I'm actually not going to spend a lot of time on macro level stuff, because I think that that's really unattainable for most people. And I would like to develop a regenerative movement that includes all people. That includes the working class people. That includes poor people, homeless people. That includes children. Right? And if we're going to address the issues of all these different communities, then we can't stand on our high horse and say, no, it's everything has to be anti-capitalist, because you know what? The working class community, they survive off of their careers, off of their jobs, how they provide for their families, right? So if we're going to message a movement that's inclusive of all people, then we have to understand the cultural and real life day-to-day situations that people are living in. And so within that, that's kind of a basis for where my approach is that we want to be site specific and culture specific. Okay. Site specific and culture specific. And that's the place that we start. The other piece is that whatever you're doing, right? So I run 5 businesses. I have 3 LLCs and 2 sole proprietorship businesses. And within almost all the businesses that I'm part of, there's a part of our exchange with the community which is totally non-monetary. And I think that whatever kind of organizations or businesses, if we're looking at business and business organizations as one of the tools for scaling up solutions, and I believe it is a key factor, then at least a part of our plan, we want to be working towards something different, working towards a worker-owner model, providing gift economy as part of our exchange, because I don't think we can clear-cut the system and then all of a sudden start anew and, whoa, we've saved the day. It has to be transitional. It has to be successional. Like, look at the devastation of the wildfires right now. If we were able to manage our forest ecologies and our pastoral ecologies in a way that native people have managed for the past 10,000 years, then we'd be having fire every 4 to 7 years. And those would be healing fires that would still maintain the canopy structures of the forest. I'm using that as an analogy for our economy, that right now, devastating wildfires that are incinerating whole communities, that's like what would happen if we tried to clear cut the economy and just completely do away with it overnight. So we have to be transitional. We have to have smaller regenerative disturbances that can allow us to safely move away from a destructive economy into a regenerative one. And I think that business is a very powerful tool for doing that. And that's why I've been speaking a lot over the past decade about starting small businesses, because one of the things that I experienced as an activist and a permaculturist and a designer is that when I started my first business, Permaculture Artisans, in the first year, we planted more edible trees. We built more water harvesting systems. We developed more soil fertility plans and implemented them on larger acreage than in 2 or 3 years of nonprofit and activist work prior to that. And that was because we were organized, we were professional, and that the community of people that were working in developing these landscapes and these farms were getting paid. Okay. And I think that one of the messages that I want to provide in this conversation is that for the cultures and communities that are dependent on a money system, we can quickly and rapidly shift the economy from a distractive one to a regenerative one just by creating regenerative businesses that catch water, businesses that build soil, businesses that reforest the destroyed lands that of our, the last 150 years. I mean, if you look at the scale of destruction right now on planet Earth, what is it going to take to regenerate? What's it going to take to plant 1 million trees? What's it going to take to restore our watersheds? Well, it's going to take a lot of labor. It's going to take material. It's going to take energy. And currently in the system that we're living in, that means money. So I think that part of the challenge and part of our scaling opportunity here is, how do we turn money into food? How do we turn money into soil? How do we turn money into water? How do we turn money into forests and healthy communities? And we do that through our businesses and our organizations. And this is for the working class community that has a pattern of working, multiple generations, 40 to 80 hours a week. Well, what if the work they were doing was reforesting? What if the work they were doing was restoring watersheds? And I'm going to give an example of regenerative businesses. And nonprofit organizations are right there alongside businesses as systems and structures that we can be using right now to implement regenerative culture immediately. So Susan, of course, nonprofits are a vital key component. And so that's why it's not one or the other. There's no one way. It's how do we create a diversity, an ecosystem of different approaches to this. So, but my big point here is that whatever your organization or your business or your project, how many of these different systems can you incorporate? Profit sharing, barter, resource sharing cooperatives, worker owner models, gift economy. And I'm going to give you guys examples of some businesses and organizations that are doing this stuff. But how many of these different pieces can you incorporate into your transaction so it's not 100% monetary? As our systems change, we have to have those those safety nets. And that's why I'm always applying the permaculture principle of succession of evolution. If we can design our businesses and organizations to function like a regenerating forest, function like a regenerating watershed, then we can deal with today's problems today, but we can develop a vision for in a transition to, and I know a lot of you with transition, this is what you're doing, and probably a lot of this isn't new to you. But I just feel like it's important framing for the conversation as we go forward into some of the other solutions, that these are key factors here. Okay, so let me go out of there. And so one of the things that we can do, let's see, where do we want to go next? Why don't we go into some of the skill sets that are actually required right now to scale solutions? So organizing skills. Everybody needs to learn these organizing skills if we're going to scale this up, because one of the issues we've had in the ecological regeneration movement, in the permaculture movement for the past 20 years, is the issue about professionalism. All right, and this gets to messaging, and I'm going to get to messaging a little bit later, but it's the issue of professionalism, because the thing is how are people going to take us seriously? I mean, honestly, like, how do people take us seriously? We're not going to shift culture overnight. We're not going to shift people's concepts of the value of nature or whether they should eat organic food or not. That it's not going to shift overnight. That's the long arc of shifting culture. But they're definitely not, the mainstream culture and decision makers are definitely not going to take you seriously if you're not professional in your presentation, if you're not professional in how we provide our solutions. And again, like I was saying, 10 years ago, the whole conversation around permaculture people in the landscape industry, and I saw Rick Taylor was here. Rick is a pioneer in shifting the landscape industry into a more ecological system. And he and I have talked about many times about how when we have clientele, when someone calls me up, okay, I want to do a landscape. Well, if I show up, with clothes that are like holes in my clothes and stoned, I just smoked a joint before I showed up, and I'm just like talking about all these swales and food forests and stuff, and my client has never even heard the word swale or food forest before. Well, they're not necessarily going to take me seriously, and they're not necessarily going to take the solutions that I'm providing to their landscape as serious and relevant to them either. So professionalism is one key piece that we need to be teaching people this in permaculture courses. We need to be teaching this in our through our educational systems as regenerative designers, that there's a way that people will take you seriously. And if we just decide, if we don't implement that, then we're going to turn a lot of people off. I've had situations where I've had clients who are very conservative, but they want to do the right thing by the land. And I was able to talk them in to doing 100% rain catchment. I was able to talk them into planting edible trees and dealing with the erosion on their site. And they easily could have hired another landscape designer who brought none of that and just made their dreams come true through a bunch of hardscaping and an outdoor fire pit and a pool, right? So how we show up really makes a difference. And I think one of the biggest issues that we face in scaling up solutions is how we communicate them. And communication skills are really important. And it really goes to facilitation and self-facilitation. These are key skills that should be taught right alongside how to plant a tree. If we're talking about scaling up these solutions and we're talking about bringing in a diversity of people and communities and cultures into this work, then we have to know how to listen. We have to know how to ask the right questions. We have to know how to be able to be in a room with people who think totally differently than us, that think differently from each other, and help find common ground, help find common solutions. And so these are skills that will really help in our growth in regenerative cultures and facilitating this throughout the world. And one really great tool is the Designstret Process. And I love this one here, how we say, hear, dream, create. So the more that we can create the opportunity for our communities to have containers, council, meetings, forums, circles, where they can collectively design their world, their community, and that we can hear what the problems actually are. Because one of the issues that we have in a lot of our decision makers, and whether it's corporate leaders or it's even nonprofit leaders or it's local governance, is that people think they know what the community needs. People think they know what the solution is. Even I might show up and think, oh, I'm a permaculturist. I have all this experience. I have all this vision. Let me just tell you how it is. Well, let me tell y'all that doesn't actually work very well. And so part about the need for good communication skills is the need to show up and listen, truly listen, deeply listen, and then help communities, support communities in solving their problems themselves. All right. So the least amount of intervention that we as regenerative designers provide, the least amount of intervention, but the more facilitation we provide, then communities can claim and own solutions for themselves. And they usually have a better pulse on what's needed and the history of a community or a culture or a situation. And then there's dreaming, and then there's creating. And there's a very practical side to all of this, which I think we miss often as in activist movements and stuff, is we get really good in the dream, like right in here, we're like really good in the dream. We're not always good in the listening. And then when we get into creation, we're out there doing stuff, but often it's not grounded in the listening. So we go out and we do a bunch of shit, and then not that, some of it is successful and some of it's not. And then we learn. But the more that we can follow this process of hear, dream, create, the stronger foundation. It's like we're developing healthy soil. And now the seeds that we plant, these dreamy seeds that we plant, will actually grow into something fruitful. Now I'm going to leave this image with you for a second. I'm going to just step away one moment. I'll be right back.
And maybe we can use this space just to share what's coming up, what's alive for us. I mean, Erik won't hear us, but if anyone's got any burning shares, actually with the Zoom video conference feature we're using, there's not a raise hand, but you can unmute yourself and feel free to say a couple of words. You can toggle mute in the lower left hand if you're a video participant. Oh, the host muted you. I can't unmute you. I can unmute you. Forgive me. There's so many people here. 56 people at the moment. Susan, did you want to share something? I just unmuted you.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, this is all beautiful and amazing. I think it's easier said than done. Yeah.
And Erik's rejoining us. Erik, while you were out, I invited folks to share with the group. Susan said, easier said than done. And if anyone else wanted to chime in quickly, otherwise, Erik, feel free to take it away. What I'll invite, actually, if you do want to share, just let us know in the chat.
Yeah, easier said than done. Yeah, but we're doing it, and we're going to keep doing it. And there are things that are actually easier done than said too. So we have to look at that. So I'm going to move. I will just say that there's so much that I want to cover with you all, and I'm not going to get to it. But I do want to move on to some other pieces because I think there's some exciting stuff to talk about. But one point that I think is really important, because we feel the urgency of the moment of the climate crisis, there's a feeling of needing to act. And there are moments where we have to act right away. But there's something that I've learned over the last 20 years, because I'm a big visionary. I spend a lot of time visioning this and that, and going out there and trying to create it and all this stuff. And sometimes my projects don't work out, my visions don't work out. I wonder how many of you visionary people have experienced that sense of experience that feeling like you went out to try to create something in your community and it didn't really turn out the way you wanted, and then you feel that feeling of like, oh man, I'm a failure, or the community doesn't want to receive this, or so let me just unpack for a moment that we have to work successionally in this transition where we have to take immediate action, while at the same time we have to be planting redwood seeds, right? And the one thing I've experienced is all the greatest things I've ever done, the organizations that have had the most effect, that I've helped initiate, any project that I've ever done that was like really, truly successful, it took a lot more time to develop than I thought. And so there's a real need to have patience to see through the vision. And Susan, I totally get you here. Don't worry. Don't worry about it, sister. You weren't being negative, and it's important that we balance all these things. So it's important to have patience to see through the vision. And one of the things that I had a vision for about 6 years ago was starting the Permaculture Skill Center. And this is the Permaculture Skill Center, a little bit of it right here. And so this whole land, this was a 5-acre, this whole property, which is a 5-acre demonstration site, was just a 5-acre harding grass pasture. Harding grass is a pretty invasive perennial grass. Incidentally, actually, harding grass in Sonoma County was seeded after the 1964 or 54 fires to reduce erosion, and now it's actually a major fuel load issue. So talk about planning, talk about misjudgment on our planning. But so 6 years ago, we had the vision to develop the Permaculture Skill Center. It was just a hardy grass meadow. Now we've planted over 250 fruit and nut trees that are maturing, coming into harvest. We've got multiple farmers on site. We incubate farmers and support farmers. So they're on site, starting their farms, developing a regenerative agriculture economy right here on this site. We have roof catchment systems and gray water systems and hugelkultur systems and everything that you can think of, we've implemented on this site. And it's been a real process, you know, because you want things to move quickly. And so I just want to encourage us all that, yes, we have to have a little bit of patience. We have to let the solutions take the time that they need to regenerate. The redwood forest isn't, you know, we're going to plant these redwood seeds. It's going to take years, decades, centuries for them to grow, and we have to be able to think within those timeframes. That being said, there is a need for urgency, and that's why one of the things that is immediately available to us, like right now, is this concept of developing organizational guilds. This, I think, is one of our key components to scaling up. And one of the pieces of developing an organizational guild is that, you know, we have to get out of our own way. We have to be willing to work with people, governments, corporations, organizations, schools, you know, churches. We have to be able to work with a diversity of organizations, whether they have the similar value system or not. We need to be able to find those common grounds, those places that we can support each other and start to develop organizational guilds. Because if we're applying the permaculture principle, least change for the greatest effect. Well, one thing that we know is we have a large centralized system of governance. We have centralized systems of commerce, of production, of transportation, of education, of communication. We've got all this infrastructure that's in place right now, the infrastructure that is currently serving a destructive economy and destructive society. But if we can literally take over, like mycelium, like take over these that infrastructure with conscious people and with good design, then that is when things happen quickly. That is when we can really move on the urgency of things. Now, of course, Trump and federal government, they're on the opposite side, pushing things the other direction. So while that fight needs to happen, don't expect much success in making regenerative solutions happen through that part of the fight. Let's try to reduce harm, but where can you go right now today? What organizations, churches, schools, governments, corporations, that are ripe and ready right now on the fence to step into this regenerative movement? Those are the places that we need to be working on. Those are the folks that we need to be bringing into the fold and developing these organizational guilds. One such experience is represented here. This is the city of Sebastopol, and my business, Permaculture Artisans. We worked with Daily Axe organization. Many of you probably know Trayton Heckman and Daily Axe organization. We've been working together for the past 18 years. I've been working with Trayton and on a bunch of cool projects. And so here, over the years, we've sort of inoculated and transformed our city of Sebastopol here, both city staff and city governance, to be more ecologically minded. And one of the things we did a couple of years ago, Permaculture Artisans with Daily Axe with the city of Sebastopol, as we transformed the entire Sebastopol Public Library and City Hall into an edible forest garden that's totally open to the public. And this is just one of dozens, if not hundreds of examples of what's happening all over the country and the world right now, where we're literally taking over public space, literally working with local government, that reducing their need. Like, this was a lawn that needed to be maintained, that was water guzzling. These are all issues for the city. And now it's a beautifully transformed edible forest garden open to the public. And one of the things that we did with this one, which is really cool, is we actually called it a living history garden, a living cultural history. Oh, there it is. Sebastopol's living history garden. So we literally designed this garden in this public garden in different areas, which represented different historical cultures of the area. So we have a zone that's all native plants that the Native American community utilized when they were, stewarding all these lands. We have an agrarian area where when the settlers came and the agrarian culture. We have a Luther Burbank zone. We've got a modern day permaculture garden. So these gardens are living history gardens that educate the community about where we've come from, where the land has come from, the different land stewardship methodologies. And now this is all in a public place. It's a living system that we can connect with. And this is the kind of organizational guilding. This is the effect of working with different organizations and businesses and government to create solutions. And like I said, there's just so many different examples of this. So here is, let's see. Here is one of the organizational guilds that I've helped develop. This is the Permaculture Skill Center. So again, we're talking about thinking about organizing businesses, governments, and organizations like we would a plant community. In permaculture, we talk a lot about plant guilds, where you plant an apple tree and then maybe we're planting some nitrogen fixing plants under that. Maybe there's some salvia under that is attracting beneficials. And so we're organizing these plant communities where everyone is supporting everyone else. Well, we can do that organizationally with our organizational guilds. And so this is one that I've developed. I've got the Permaculture Skill Center here, which is our 5-acre demonstration site. It's our education center. And as part of that, we have Permaculture Artisans, which is the design contracting company that I own. We have 15 to 20 employees at any one time at Permaculture Artisans. We design, install, and maintain landscapes all over Northern California. And just to think about this for a minute, like Permaculture Artisans, everybody who works for that company is literally regenerating the planet every single day. That is their job. Their job is to regenerate the planet. I mean, that for me, like that legacy feels amazing in the daily work that we do. We just got a 600-acre regenerative retreat center that we'll hopefully be working on soon, doing carbon farming and fuel load management and regenerative agriculture. And there's dozens and dozens of projects like these that come into the fold. Living Guild is an organization that's also tied in with this, which is a community design organization that actually works with county and city government, developing and convening those facilitation councils around how to design our communities in a way that is regenerative and that actually works with the culture and community. Foresight Mapping is a mapping company that I actually co-own with Rick Taylor, who's on the session here today, and we do digital mapping services. So one of the ways that we support each other is, like, for instance, Permaculture Artisans requires mapping systems in order for us to design our projects. Foresight Mapping now develops those maps for Permaculture Artisans. So you've got this, the resource of one is needed for the other. And so we're creating cyclical systems between organizations. Red H Farm is one of the farmers that's on site at the Permaculture Skill Center. Katie Hachtmeyer, she does no-till regenerative vegetable farming. And so she brings a whole community of people onto the site. She builds soil, she sequesters carbon, she grows food for the community, and that's part of this whole guild. We've got Daily Axe, who's one of our organizational partners, and Daily Axe, for those of you who maybe don't know, they're a nonprofit organization that has planted hundreds of gardens throughout the community, public gardens. They work with county and city. They've been important organization after the fires that hit Sonoma County in 2017 last year. They've done gray water systems and rain catchment systems, and they've really scaled to a level that is one of the best examples of this probably in the world. Leap LLC, that's an LLC that I own that actually owns the land that the Permaculture Skill Center is on. Lift Economy, Kevin Bayuk, Sean Barry and team, they are a regenerative business coaching organization, and they've been part of our mentors and have been coaching us for the past 5 years. And when it comes to like, how do we develop a worker-owned co-op? Like, what does it actually look like? How do we do profit sharing with our staff community so that the value system actually feeds all the people involved in the business? They're the folks that help us navigate those kinds of questions and come up with design plans. A few things people are saying here, just looking, Nils, maybe you can put in put in some of these websites for daily acts for permaculture artisans. Brad, Permaculture Skill Center is open to the public. We'll be scheduling more tours in spring. Susan is asking, how do you work with community groups who don't have any more for these services? It's an issue that lots of community groups don't have funding. Groups would love digital mapping, for example. So that's great. And remember, I talked about when I talked about the transitional economics, and like every one of these businesses needs to have something other than money as a way of exchange. Well, foresight mapping, one of the things that we did was we developed the mapping templates for the fire rebuild. That wasn't something that we got paid for. That was a donation to the community to help people rebuild. We developed helped develop the mapping templates that people are using for their rebuild landscapes since the fire. We Permaculture Skill Center. One of the great projects we did a couple years ago is we went down to the Great Day Labor Center, and we worked with them to design the whole day labor center into a demonstration ecological landscape. And then we held 5 free workshops in Spanish, developing roof catchment systems, food forests, doing irrigation, drip irrigation, sheet mulching, and basically teaching the day labor community a set of ecological skills that they could do right in their own headquarters. And then thus they can provide those skills to the community. So lots of different ways to move out of a straight money system and actually build community and develop these solutions at all different levels. I'm gonna get out of this. So organizational guilds are huge. There's also just straight people guilds, and this is something, and this is really no money involved here in a people guild scenario. Permaculture guilds, we have a permaculture guild here in Sonoma County. We just met last week. Here's actually a picture of last week's council fire. There's about 40 folks that came out, and these are totally open to the public. We have the wood-fired oven we fire up, and then all of this networking and connecting happens just informally to help support each other, to identify resources that are needed. This is how we come together as a community to support the different needs. We've got different professional networks we work with. So every one of us, movement makers, regenerative designers, ecological designers, if we can develop people guilds, right? Like I have an online course, the Eco Landscape Mastery School, and I've got students all over the world developing their own ecological landscape businesses, and I'm coaching and mentoring them. And a lot of folks don't have like all the skill sets. You know, someone who's just starting out doesn't necessarily know how to draft a design, or doesn't necessarily have the experience of building a pond. Well, one of the things I encourage my students, and I will encourage all of you, is if you don't have a skill set, that's okay. Who in your community has that skill set, and can you build a professional relationship with them? And that's how I started Permaculture Artisans. Is I didn't know everything about everything, and if I was going to build a water harvesting pond, and I've never done that before, well, I'm going to get the pond expert in, and we're going to build a relationship, and we're going to make it happen. I'm not going to be discouraged by the fact that I don't know something. I'm going to reach out into my community and start threading in and weaving that tapestry of community, because all the knowledge exists in our communities. It's just a matter of how we build a relationship. Back to those communication skills, right? With good communication skills, with professionalism, with good facilitation, we can develop relationships with all different kinds of people. They don't necessarily have to share our value system, but we can weave their skills into the development of a regenerative world. Let's talk about land stewardship for a moment, because this is an area where I think there is a huge amount of scaling that's possible right now. especially in the wake of natural disasters like the fires, like the hurricanes, the flooding, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. These natural disasters, they really damage our economy. And they're those wake-up moments for people who don't necessarily have an ecological value system. But like before the big fires came, drought was really California's top peak issue that people were thinking about. And I had people calling us, hiring permaculture artisans left and right, not because they want to harvest water or be ecological, but because they don't have water, right? They ran out of water. And now what are they going to do? Well, wow, roof catchment system, infiltration in the landscape. Those sound like some pretty good solutions to provide some resiliency to folks who wouldn't necessarily be thinking about that. So what's happening on the land is a really great in to developing regenerative thinking in a community and to scaling those solutions. And the other day I was in a park that I like to walk a lot, and I saw this sign here from the regional Sonoma County Regional Parks: grazing the Laguna Trail, animal grazing controls invasive weeds without the use of herbicide, benefit native plants, reduce risk of wildfire, supports local agriculture. Sheep will be grazing the Laguna Trail. So I was so excited when I saw that, because to me, it's like, oh, now we're waking up. We're not just spraying glyphosate all over our public lands and polluting the watersheds and destroying the soil and the ecology. We can actually utilize an ecological approach to management that helps build soil, sequester carbon, and supports the local economy. This is happening at a regional scale here in Sonoma County. This is happening with decision makers throughout the community. So now that we are in the wake of these big fires, what we're noticing in our area is a lot of funding is starting to come in. State funding, federal funding, local funding is all coming in to literally steward our landscapes ecologically. It's pretty incredible to see that. And it's not the conversation of let's do it ecologically. It's what's affordable, what's effective, what is going to have the quickest possible desired effect. And often an ecological approach fits into that. So under land stewardship, ways we can scale up the regeneration is, and again, this is messaging means. This is how do we package the solutions of a regenerative design into a messaging that institutional organizations, governments, corporations, et cetera, can actually listen to and say, oh, wow, that's actually a good idea. Let's implement that. Fuel load management, that's one. Watershed restoration. Water quality and water quantity are big issues that every community faces. And so if we can speak the solutions of watershed restoration as solutions to water quality for communities, then we can really bring in allies that are decision makers and maybe have resources. Prescribed burning, reforestation, wild tending, public grazing, and here's those redwood cones again. So land stewardship is a place that we have a lot of gains. And let's see, I wanted to go over here to, was it local government scaling? Yes. So I wanted to share this as an institutional regeneration guild that we see emerging here in our community, but actually throughout California and in other parts of the world as well, which is that now regional parks, the County of Sonoma, including board of supervisors, the resource conservation districts, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, land trusts, cities, and organizations like Daily Acts and Permaculture Artisans, we're all converging in the conversation and implementation of the management and regeneration of our environment and how it affects the economy and how it affects the community. One example of that is the RCDs, the Resource Conservation Districts, are the conduit for funding, state and federal funding, to protect the endangered coho salmon. Now, one of the ways that they're implementing the plan on the ground is any community that is drawing water out of a salmon-bearing river or creek is available to get funding to have roof catchment systems designed and installed on their properties, so that in the summertime, they utilize their roof catchment water rather than pulling water out of creeks and rivers. And the summertime is the most important time for the coho salmon rearing. And so Permaculture Artisans designs and installs these roof catchment systems with the Resource Conservation District. And I'll tell you, the RCD program has designed and installed systems that are catching millions of gallons of water every single year. That's millions of gallons of water that is staying in the creeks and rivers. Talk about watershed restoration to scale, right? Like, this is real stuff. It's happening. And Permaculture Artisans, my company, my staff are designing and installing these things. That's their career. They're taking care of their families. And in some cases, sending money home to Mexico to take care of two families, their families in Mexico, the families here, by providing a watershed level solution to protect coho salmon, which inevitably also protect our watershed as a whole through this institutional gilding. Now, the Sonoma Land Trust, which is an amazing land trust, has been working with the county to buy up huge ranches throughout the bioregion, and then steward them ecologically through rotational grazing practices, doing fuel load reduction to reduce forest threat, and manage pastoral grasslands into diversity. So these things are really happening. They're happening at the institutional level, but they didn't just happen overnight. And that's why we have absolutely got to look at local government as one of our key solutions. It's been a 20-year infiltration takeover of the local government in our bioregion to enable these kinds of solutions at scale. And so now is the time, like right now, we don't wait, start educating and electing local government representatives, whether it be city council, whether it be supervisor, whether it be school board, whatever it is, get active in this piece. Because yes, it might be difficult when we start thinking at Senate races and presidential races and things like that. That can be a little disheartening, especially if you're in a community that doesn't share these values. But on the local level, man, remember what I said earlier? The whole point of this is to globalize localization. Globalize localization. So in order to do that, we have got to take over our local governments. And that doesn't just mean elected officials, but that's building relationships with the staff. What's really funny, I've worked with a lot of schools over the years, high schools and elementary schools, middle schools. And it's really funny how you could get a principal to be really on board for planting a school garden. You can get a bunch of teachers on board for planting a school garden. You can get a bunch of parents on board for planting a school garden. But the person who actually you have to win over above all else are the maintenance people, the people who are actually maintaining this, right? And it's the same for cities, the same for counties. You've got to build relationships with the people who are actually on the ground doing the work day to day, not just decision makers. And it's just people are totally don't see that, don't recognize the power or the need to incorporate all the stakeholders into the process. But we found a lot of times, like, that's where we have to focus is with the maintenance. And that's why you have to develop relationships with staff people, with city managers, city clerks, parks managers. Those are the people who can make recommendations and they're literally on the ground. We were working with, we had a roof water harvesting workshop a couple months ago, and we had an East Bay Parks supervisor in that course, learning all about water management, water harvesting and everything. And he helps manage over 70 parks and thousands of acres of public land. And so it's really funny. He's not an elected person, but he's deciding, are we going to be using Roundup today or not? He's deciding, what do we do with all this fuel load material that we just pulled out? Are we going to haul it away, transport it, or are we going to keep it on site? These little decisions that have big effects in the ecology and in the climate, if we can get and educate and build relationships with people who are making those decisions, then every day the daily acts are going to shift. And there's a lot of comments in here, and I haven't really been been finding, I haven't been following all your comments. Sorry about that. And so there's a question here from Ellen. Eric, specifically, how are Sonoma County fire agencies integrating hiring permaculture skilled folk to assist in implementing water catchment tank systems? What are the resources to do this? Well, when we talk about fire, well, one of the things, just a quick answer to that, is that after the fires burned through Santa Rosa, took out over 5,000 structures, and now we're dealing with that hazard. Well, everybody who rebuilds their house, this is a funny little loophole, right? So now when everyone who has to rebuild their house, they have to comply with all of the newer existing building standards. And so one of the things they have to comply with is called WELO, Water Efficient Landscaping Ordinance, which means that they need to have a water saving landscape plan in order to get a permit to rebuild their house. So they can't even build their house until they have a landscape plan. So one of the things that Santa Rosa City and Sonoma County Water Agency and Sonoma County supervisors help support with the help of Daily Acts, with the help of Foresight Mapping and some other organizations, is landscape templates that people could use, pre-approved templates that people could use to help get their houses built and get their building permits. Well, inside those templates are roof catchment systems, rain gardens, edible forest gardens, passive solar design. So we've literally had the opportunity to now, on a massive scale during the rebuild, affect the way people look at their landscapes and empower people to do ecological techniques on their properties. And in fact, now the city of Santa Rosa is actually providing 25-cent per gallon rebate for folks who are installing roof catchment systems in the city of Santa Rosa. What a progressive program. What a precedent-setting program to get a rebate to install a roof catchment system. Think, like, many municipalities wouldn't want to do that because they make money off of you using their municipal water. So there's actually probably most communities, it's not even legal yet in cities to do that. So that's some ways that that's happening. Let's see, there's a lot here. A lot of great conversation happening in the comments there. I'm just going to kind of skip that for now. We've got just a little bit more time, and there's a few really important pieces I didn't get to. I need to step away 1 minute, excuse me, and then I'll come back and we'll finish this out.
You guys, I found the key. There's a button that I pressed that said allow participants to unmute themselves. So now, Mary Beth or anybody, if you do want to chime in for a moment, it's also perfectly fine not to, but acknowledge that there's probably a lot of wisdom in this room.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, hi, Jeff from New York. Very hopeful. Across the board, very hopeful. And it is so important to engage locally, because even though there is an amazing groundswell of people who share these perspectives, we're dealing with communities and neighbors and family and friends who don't see any of this yet. So the only way we can lead is by talking and by example. And by example doesn't even work all that well, because as Eric said earlier, example is on our own homesteads, not down in town. So we really have to get out there and talk to people. We have to look and act normal and engage.
Yes, sir. Susan? Oh, got you.
This work is super inspirational, and I think that part of the key is getting funding for community organizers. I feel like a lot of people are doing this work voluntarily, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And so if we had more people working in nonprofits as community organizers, what if transition initiatives were funded? What if groups like those were funded? We need more money coming into our movement for these sorts of community organizing efforts.
Yeah, we do. All right. Okay. Well, and let me just say on that, what Susan was just saying about needing more money into the movement. I mean, that's why I really that's one reason why I have been really encouraging people to start their own businesses lately, because there's, I mean, all the things need to happen. It's all the diversity. I hold all the solutions in a big basket of yes. I think that I've had conversations before where people are like, well, don't do business, just let's get money, let's get big money, right? And to invest in the movement. Absolutely. Yes, it has to happen. But the thing about starting a small business in your community that does this is now you and I get to work together. I get to provide you with a service. You provide me with a service. Now it's just between you and me. It's not between all these other big organizations and everything like that. And so I find that the more we localize our solutions, the more we get together and support each other. You know, the more that I provide a service for you and you provide a product for me, and we figure that out, maybe it's money exchange, maybe it's something else. I believe that is actually the true foundation for transitioning to regenerative culture. And that's why I think it's really hard to track how much solutions have been implemented, because a lot of people are just working locally. All right, so enough on that. We just have a little bit of time. I'll just mention that, food gardens everywhere, public forest gardens, community gardens, neighborhood garden networks, every home. This is stuff that's been talked about a ton, and we just have to keep planting food everywhere we go all the time in our communities. But here I think is ultimately the piece that is the make or break. And that's the personal and cultural healing. I thought about starting with this, but I feel like, but I didn't. I wanted to come around to this at the end because I think people were expecting some of the other stuff. But I think that the personal and cultural healing is a make or break for all of this. I don't know how many of you have experienced burnout over the past in your life of doing this work, but I've had a few different stages in my life where I had burnout. Full-on health crises, chronic health issues, deep paralyzing grief, and there's a lot of people in our world that are fully in their trauma and fully in their grief, and there's a lot of people struggling. And when I first got sick with this chronic health thing about 14 years ago, after about a couple of years of that, I really shifted how I saw solutions in community. Because for a long time, I was an activist, and I would judge people on what they do, and I would judge people for their choices, and I would hate people for what they do, because I would feel the grief so much of like the world. But then I got sick, and then my mother overdosed on opioids and died. And those two experiences taught me something, which is that which was compassion for other people, and to realize that I don't really know what's going on for someone else. They might be making this or that choice that I wouldn't make, that I think is destructive, and I have a bunch of judgment on them. But where is it? Is it coming from pain? Do they know better? What are they comfortable right now? Or are you comfortable right now in your body? Are you comfortable in your heart right now? Right? I think that if we miss this piece in scaling solutions, we will fail. And I believe that the way to develop space for healing starts with very deep listening skills. It starts with acknowledging the systems of oppression that are woven throughout our entire society, and finding ways to dismantle those. That's a whole topic in of itself to talk about, but it absolutely has to be acknowledged here as part of this. And that if we don't work on the collective grief and trauma that's in our communities currently, none of this stuff matters, honestly. Like, people are surviving day to day, and like they can't. It's too much. It's too much to say, you have to do this, you have to do that, you're wrong if you don't do this or that. But if we can show up with love, if we can be love and show up with love, and truly, deeply, and authentically connect with people from a place of our own hurt and pain to how we support them in their own grief, in their own pain, then we can open up conversations that bring solutions to the table, that are local, that are regenerative, that are ecological. And within all of this work, if we can't take care of ourselves, if we can't do the self-care to take care of ourselves and all this, well, you're not going to keep going. You're not going to be able to keep the momentum and the energy going. You're going to build organizations and they are going to collapse if everybody inside the organization is sick, if everybody inside the organization is in pain. It's not, the solution won't be one that can last through and be resilient through what's to come. So I really deeply feel that that if we can't include this piece into everything that we do, then we're going to miss the mark. We're going to completely miss the mark. And I'm sort of trying to hold back my tears right now because I feel it for myself. I know what I've gone through, and I'm a privileged white boy, and I've gone through what I've gone through. There's people who haven't had that kind of support and privilege, and so, but it's not about showing up with the solution. Stop showing up with the solution, folks. Show up with a listening heart and a listening ear. The solutions will present themselves. Communities already know what to do. We just have to give them the love and support to be able to do that safely. So I think it's a key piece. And one thing that it really comes to is, so that being said, deep breath. Now a little self-promotion. Not the most elegant transition, but I did want to share with you guys this while we have time, this book that I have coming out here in the next couple months, because I think that messaging, right, and part of the segue there from the listening and the compassion and everything has a lot to do with how we message our solutions, how we message the movement. And I don't think we're going to be able to scale solutions if the messaging is off. If it's you're either with us or you're against us, or you're either doing this and you're good, or you're doing that and you're bad. That kind of messaging, I do not believe is going to bring in the level of community that we need. So I just wanted to share, I've got this book coming out in the next couple months. Keep an eye out for it, The Ecological Landscape Professional. This book is really about bringing the solutions of permaculture, land restoration, and landscape design into a professional setting. So it's really about supporting folks in taking this away from being a hobby to literally develop organizations and businesses, and that people can do this as careers, to do this regenerative work as a career, and develop those livelihoods for themselves and their communities. And I think this is one of the key foundational roots for scaling regeneration. So with that, I will take any other questions, or Nils, I don't know if there's anything else you want to bring into the mix. We've got about 5-6 more minutes. And
well, I have enabled folks to unmute themselves. If you happen to be an audio participant, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. And just before any comments come forward, Erik, I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you have other places where folks can find your work beyond permacultureskillcenter.org. Are there any other places of contact that you want to put out there?
Yeah, there's a permacultureartisans.com. That's our landscape design contracting company. There's erikolsen.com. That's my website. I have my books there, and this book is this new book will be available through my website as well as all online retailers. And then I have an online course that is open to folks who want to develop, it's called the Eco Landscape Mastery School Professional Development Program. We're working with people in their own communities, people all over the world, Europe, Asia, South America, Mexico, Canada, all of the United States. We've got students who are developing their own regenerative businesses and organizations, and we do live coaching and live mentoring every month. There's a whole core curriculum there to help people develop their own businesses. So you can find that at Permaculture Skill Center .org if you're interested in the online school. So yeah, that's it, and I'll stop this here.
Great. There are a bunch of questions in the chat, so I don't know if you want to take a couple of those. We do have about 5 minutes left. Folks can also chime in if you feel so called to do that.
Let's see. David is asking, recommend regenerative ecology contact Santa Barbara County. Yes. SB Organics. Lauren, his last name, I forgot his last name. SB Organics. My colleague Lauren down there, he would be a great person to connect with that. Let's see. What do you think about climate-controlled farming techniques? Is that a question there? Where'd that go? And I'm curious what like indoor, Brianna, like indoor farming and things like that. I actually personally, I think that we need to be farming in soil. So I'm not like a huge fan of a lot of indoor farming stuff. Because I think that soil is where we can store carbon, and building soil ecology is really vital. So someone asked about the mind map thing. This is called, what is this called? This is called, let me see. Simple Mind is that. And I've developed this on an iPad here, Simple Mind. It's really, really fun. I can definitely share the mind maps in a PDF. So when Nils, when you set up the record, I'll definitely share that in mine. I'll share that. Yeah, Lanudic. Yeah, Lauren Lanudic. Let's see here. Susan, love to connect with you always. Let's do this. How can we save soil in urban spaces? Bonnie's asking. Well, first off, we've got to find a way to take over public spaces by working with city parks and maintenance and help that narrative. There's plenty of precedent setting all over the country and the world right now with public nonprofit public interface of managing our public lands. So that's really huge. I'm really personally, I'm pretty into guerrilla gardening, folks. I've been doing seed ball guerrilla gardening like my whole adult life, and you can build a lot of soil that way. Also, how does your community manage your organic waste? That is a huge, massive question. We've had one of the most cutting edge programs here in Sonoma County that got shut down a couple years ago. Sonoma Compost, which took all the organic waste produced in our county, developed organic compost and mulching, and then donated it to schools, community gardens, and it was also the cheapest material for farmers and landscapers. That program's coming back in the next year to Sonoma County. Ask your officials, are you hauling out tree waste, leaf waste, compost waste out of your community? If you want to solve a problem in your community, boom, right there, you're helping the climate crisis, you're helping mitigate, you're helping build soil, you're developing options for your local community to build gardens and soil. That's huge. Let's see, schools. I mean, schools always need that support. That's also a key spot to work in. What were some other? Land is being used for large developments. Vacant land is almost gone in the Bay Area. That is true. Now there's also the rooftop farm movement that's starting to take off as well. So we can also be cultivating our rooftops in cities and growing food there. Top Leaf Farms, my really good friend, longtime colleague Benjamin Farr runs that in the East Bay, and they're growing currently 12,000 square feet of organic vegetables and habitat gardens on roofs. Who are some top pond designers in the Bay Area? Maybe Nick Bertilis. I'm not sure if he designs ponds. I don't have someone on the tip of my tongue right now, but I would say that, when I talked about developing professional networks and working with a diversity of people, I mean, civil civil engineering contractors. There's a lot of really great civil engineering contractors out there. They're not all, especially the younger generation that's coming up. And so even just talking to them, they're the ones who know how to get ponds permitted and to build them right. And like, I work with civil engineers all the time. So bringing together a permaculture designer who might have the systems thinking approach along with a civil engineering contractor who can actually build out and get something permitted and do it right. That's usually the best approach. I would say if we're talking about like big water harvesting ponds with big dams, not many permaculture people actually know how to do that on the ground. Most people are going to need a civil engineering contractor to do that. Let's see. Recommendations for contacts in Portland, Oregon, or Oregon in general. Wow, there's so many. It's almost hard to name. I mean, Jude Hobbs, she's amazing up there. And the work of city repair is absolutely, you know, foundational for everything we're talking about here. Oh, Aura, thank you. Aura's come in. She says, as a novice with zero permaculture knowledge, I'm happy to say I made the right decision in taking the ELM online course with me and the other presenters. And you're welcome, Aura. I'm glad you were able to come on today for this presentation. So she's in the online school. Has been going through that for the next few months. So thanks for that, Aura. Wow, there's just so much. I feel like we're running out of time here.
Yeah, I've been wanting to jump in with just a little time awareness and just to express gratitude. First, Erik, to you for sharing your expertise with us. I love Susan's comment, are you doing this as a TED Talk? I feel like there's just so much wisdom that you bring to the larger community, and just want to honor you as a great teacher among us. So just extending appreciation. And I know I speak on behalf of a lot of other people here too. Also, I want to express gratitude to everybody who jumped on the call and participated with us today. You know, this is how it gets done, right? I mean, we're bringing our flames together, and maybe that's not the best metaphor to use in these times, but we're bringing our medicine together, and this is how we are going to transform the world. And it's happening, and it's already done. I've put Erik's links in the chat. If you scroll up in the chat a little bit, and if you're a phone participant, just erikohlsen.com, permacultureskillcenter.org, permacultureartisans.com. I'm also popping in the chat the Transition US links, transitionus.org and transitiongathering.org for information about our upcoming gathering next summer, and videos from our recent online summit that we did. There's constantly webinars like this taking place there. Free and open to anybody who wants to join. And Transition US is another one of these small organizations with a big vision. And if anyone does care to make a tax-deductible contribution today, you can do that at transitionus.org. I know, though, in so many different ways, everyone who's on this call right now is really fueling this movement and keeping it moving forward. So whether it's a financial donation or just some good work that you're doing in community, paying it forward, I want to acknowledge everybody for being here and being you, doing what you do. And Erik, and just much appreciation.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone. I love all the questions and connections. I can just only imagine what you all are doing in your own communities, and stay connected with me. I just, want to share my gratitude for you all being here today. And as Susan said, yeah, let's do this. Let's seriously do this. And I love working and networking with others. So I hope I get to connect with you all someday.
Yeah, and I just unmuted everybody. We're gonna conclude the call in just a couple seconds here, but if anyone wants to give a little shout out, make some noise from wherever you are in this world, please feel free. Everybody is currently unmuted.
Thanks, Erik.
Thanks, Erik.
so much.
Thanks, Erik.
Erik.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Erik.
Yay, love fest. All right.
All right. All the best, y'all.
Thanks,
Much
Erik.
appreciation. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.